15th of October, and they're going to give you a little bit of an update of recent events because there have been several things happening in the last 2 days.
Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to start with the most important of our updates. The people who were in residence this morning were woken up by police knocking on their tents and asking if anybody was present. And whether or not anybody answered, they proceeded by opening the tents. And for the most part, because nobody accepted their pieces of paper, they threw these down in front of everybody. This is our official eviction notice. We are to be gone by Saturday morning at 8 a.m. Okay. Vocally, they told us tomorrow morning. They wanted us out before the Remembrance Day assembly, but the paper says Saturday, so we don't expect them to move on us before that. But we think that it is very important for as many people to know as possible that they are threatening to act on us now. They have been very unspecific as to how they're going to react. It's been anything from possible fines to coming in and actually arresting us and removing our camping gear. They did a press release at City Hall this morning in response, which I do have here. Everybody is free to come take a look at it, though I only have the one copy, so we'll have to share nice. They made very little reference to the eviction notice. It was mostly in concerns for our safety and health. They want to close us down for the nights. They told us that we're more than welcome to be down there during the day with our picket signs, etc. But we're supposed to shut down camp for the nights. We're supposed to leave the park by 11 p.m. and not return till 6 a.m.
They've also closed down the main floor of City Hall to occupiers, which is kind of a violation of their open door policy as far as I'm concerned. We dropped by yesterday with the intention of going up to speak with the mayor. We were not allowed past the main floor, and we're asked to meet several times, but remain peacefully there until we close in City Hall at 4:05.
I was in attendance at the press release this morning at City Hall. When we attempted to get into the building, they would not allow us beyond the front entrance. We did state that we were there simply to respond to their media response, and they refused to even so much as let us listen to what they were saying to the media. They gave us a simple piece of paper with jot notes on it, basically. We don't really know what they said to the press. We'll probably be hearing about that through the grapevine. And our response, therefore, was not as well as we had hoped it would be, but the press did. They asked us questions in what they had been told by the city so that we could respond to it. And a lot of what we're standing on here is that we're housing homeless people down there. And they're telling us that they're concerned for our health and safety, but they haven't said anything as to what they're going to do with these homeless people when they evict them too.
Also, there's been a lot of other positive outreach through our occupation of the Victoria Park. Folks that spend a lot of time downtown have commented on how the park is actually safe to walk through at night. The park is much cleaner than it typically is at this time of year. And again, we've been providing food, shelter, and heat to those who had none before.
Yesterday when we went to City Hall, this is what we presented to them, and a number of us signed it in request to see the mayor. We are waiting for a response. So far the response has been, get out of the park. That's really all I have to say for now. Thank you.
So we'll be hearing more from other people who've been at the occupation a little bit later. First, we're going to have a little bit of a short talk by Dr. Simon Glezos.
How does it sound like that?
Department of Political Science. And here he is.
Thank you very much, Emily. Thank you, everybody, for showing up, and thank you for giving me such a prime spot at the top first. I apologize. I have to run off and teach at 1 o'clock, but nicely, I'm teaching the Communist Manifesto, so I'm considering this a sort of appetizer course. I want to thank the presentation that was just given, because it pretty much gives the intro. The broad title of my talk, and I apologize to those of you who were at the rally a couple weeks ago, it will mostly be the same. The talk that I gave was about myths about the economy, and where I want to start off talking is about this attempt to shut down Occupy Regina, the attempt to shut down Occupy encampments across Canada. We know it's happening in Vancouver. Rob Ford has ominously said that they've probably had enough time, and I think we can all trust Rob Ford to decide when enough protest is enough protest. And we know that that's just sort of the beginning. We know that protesters in multiple cities have been subject to pretty brutal violence. Beatings that have happened in Berkeley, in Oakland, in New York. And the question has to be, as was just raised, why is this so dangerous? Why is a movement that, by everybody's account, has been a thoroughly peaceful movement, why is it that it is so unacceptable? Why is it that Occupy Regina, which has set up tents in the park, which has the gall to use a public space by the public, is viewed as simply unacceptable? We know that they are saying it's for the health and safety of the protesters. As was pointed out, they are less interested in their health and safety as soon as they are not occupying the park. At that point, it is no longer the city's responsibility or even problem. So the question is, why this movement that is so obviously not a threat to health, safety, security, anything? Why is there such an effort to see it shut down? Why is there such an effort to see this obvious act of protest be silenced? And a lot of that has to do with the questions that it's asking. The response that's always presented, the critique that is always presented to the Occupy Wall Street is, what do they want? And I think John Conway is speaking. Is John Conway speaking a little bit? He might. I can make it, I'm sorry. He gave a great speech on what they want. And as many people have pointed out, it's very obvious what they want. But the crucial point of the movement and of what these various accounts have been doing is not so much the specific policies that they're advocating, but the questions that they're asking, the attention that they're attempting to bring to an obvious state of affairs that is around all of us and that we aren't allowed to talk about. Everyone is perfectly aware of what happened in 2008. Everyone has seen the absolute destruction of the economy that has ensued, and everyone is aware also of the decline of the economy that occurred prior to that. And yet we also know that the same people that caused 2008 are all still in power and all still advocating the exact same economic policies that produced the circumstances of 2008. The only reason this sort of state of affairs is allowed to continue is because no alternate discourse is allowed to exist. The only reason that you can continue to advance the same set of policies after what is so blatantly and obviously and spectacularly a failure is if no credible alternative is allowed to be spoken. And so at least part of the importance of shutting down various Occupy movements is to ensure that questions don't get to be asked and that only one voice is allowed to be heard. And so what I want to talk about in my remaining time, and I probably in my preamble used up most of it, is to talk a little bit about what that dominant discourse is, what the story that we hear in the media, that we hear from business concerns, that we hear from government, says about how the economy works. What I'm calling myths about the economy that continue to persist even as we stand amongst the rubble of our society. And that continue to persist only because there aren't allowed voices that can challenge it. So I've got three myths here, which I think I should be able to do in time. The first myth that's being presented is the backbone of the austerity measures that are being advocated in North America, in Europe, and all around the world. And it's the idea that in a time of recession, everybody has to tighten their belts. And it is one of those simple common sense myths that seems to make sense if you don't look at it too hard or actually ask questions about it. The idea that if a government's in debt, just like if a person is in debt, they have to cut spending. It seems like a thing that makes sense. It seems like an analogy that works, until you unpack it a little bit. First of all, we know that not everybody has to tighten their belts. We know that the people who have to tighten their belts are already the people whose belts are pretty damn tight to begin with. It is already the people who've had their social services cut to the bone. It's already the people that are facing unemployment. It's already the people who've seen their wages decline. It's already the people who can't get access to housing. They are the ones who are being asked to tighten their belts more. The wealthy, the top 1%, those who have most of the wealth, taxes aren't being asked of them. Belt tightening is not being asked of them. As a matter of fact, the question is, how can we get more money to them more efficiently? Second of all, we also know that it's not actually belt tightening, because we know that when we want extra money for, let's say, a new crime bill, there's always money to be found. It is only money that might go to alleviate the economic conditions that we currently have. Suddenly the coffers are dry. But even leaving these basic facts aside, the fact is, austerity measures are exactly the wrong thing to be doing in the context of a recession. A recession, and I was literally just teaching this to my Poli-Sci 100 class this morning. Thank you. A recession is essentially a vicious cycle that's caused by there not being enough money circulating in the system. People lose their jobs, which means they don't have salaries, which means they're not buying stuff, which means that places that employ people that make stuff and sell stuff can't employ those people, so they get fired, so then they don't have salaries, and so on and so forth. The way to fix that, thank you, the way to fix that is not to decrease the amount of money even further and increase the number of people that are unemployed. The way to reverse that is to inject money into that economy by using counter-cyclical spending, by providing support, by providing social spending. You can potentially give people jobs, which means that they will have money to buy things, which means that other people will be able to make that and they will have jobs, and hopefully you might get a virtuous cycle. But right now we're taking the exact policies that are likely to lead to a second recession. By the way, the exact same thing happened in the wake of the Depression. The New Deal was brought into place, they started to make progress, and then in 1937, they basically the decision of, okay, we've solved this problem, we've licked this recession, the depression problem, we can cut all of this and basically go back to pre-depression policies, and immediately you saw recession circumstances reintroduce themselves. Sorry? Myth number two. Myth number two. I'm being hurried along. Myth number two is basically the opposite side of this. And this is the idea that, well, you can't increase social spending because taxes hurt growth. And taxes, by the way, is a stand-in for pretty much everything. Regulation, unions, any sort of social assistance, things that in any way sort of expand the social sphere, potentially hurt growth. And as I've said, this is always premised upon the idea that investors, capitalists, are tremendously timid people. That they are, in most circumstances, brave, entrepreneurial souls, but as soon as the word taxes happens, they become woodland creatures who sort of scurry away and find some brush to hide in. The simple fact is, taxes do not correlate to growth. There were much higher tax rates throughout the 50s and 60s. I can actually quote you from Armin Yalnizniak, whom I've now met and know is in fact not a man. I learned that. I made this mistake the last time. For this is from a report, she's the head economist at the CCPA. In 1948, the top marginal tax rate was 80% on taxable incomes over $250,000, which would be $2.37 million. Not many Canadians fall back on tax rate. The top tax rate in 2009, average across Canada, was 42.9% for incomes above $126,000. The last time richest Canadians were taxed at this level was in the 1920s. That is how low taxes have gotten. And yet, obviously, we haven't seen any increase in growth. And what growth we have seen has gone entirely to that 1%. We know that there hasn't been economic increase since the 70s. We know that the unemployment rate has gone up. We know that for students here, the youth unemployment rate is skyrocketed, which leads me to the final point that I want to make. Yes, I will wrap up in time. And thank you. And this is the myth that the problem with the economy is that capitalists are greedy. I usually get booze when I say that part. I'm not saying that capitalists aren't greedy, but that is a line that is advanced really on both sides of the political spectrum. And it's the idea that the shortcomings of the economy are the result of moral failings of individuals. That this is sort of what's advanced, that, well, a few bad apples ruin the nation. The important point to realize is the economic policies that have been pursued over the last 30 years have been systemic ones, and they have come from the specific requirements of a capitalist system. They have demanded certain policies to be had. And if we're going to make any change in the economy, there has to be a specific attempt to engage structurally with the conditions that led to the current conditions. I'm out of time. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Simon. We now have Piper, who's up. He's been also spending a lot of time at the occupation in the last few weeks. And I'll have to lower the mic for you.
Piper. Oh, he's loud, he doesn't do it.
That's good. Hello, my name is Piper Stratton-McLaren, and I'm here to talk about what is the 99%. I talked about that yesterday down at City Hall. Well, the 99% is practically the people, well, we are the 99%. We are the people who get controlled by the 1%. We are the people who the 1% says have no life. We are the people really have a better life and have friends and family that we can spend time with. We're not just sitting in an office all the time with gold all around us. Yeah, well, some of us view us as people sitting out at the side of the street just like doing nothing. And yeah, I'm just here to talk about that. And yeah, so that's all I have to say.
That's basically what I was trying to say.
We'll call Cadmus DeLorme up. Do you want to introduce yourself? We're happy to have Cadmus here today. He's the president of the First Nations University Students Association, and he's going to talk a little bit about how students fit into this whole thing.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's lunchtime. My name is Cadmus DeLorme. I'm a fourth-year business student, and I take my classes both at First Nations University of Canada and here at the University of Regina. Before I start, I'd just like to acknowledge that we're not only standing in Saskatchewan, but we're standing in the Treaty 4 territory. That means a lot to me. With that, I heard my young friend here just talk about an office full of gold. That's really good. Give you a good picture there. I'm a fourth-year business student, and I'm First Nations. I'm not here to tell you about how rough my people have it, but I just wanted to start off by saying that we're going into a recession. My people have been in a recession for 130 years. We have been trying to fight back for anything that we had our hands on 130 years ago. So what you're doing today is trying to be that 99%. You know, we've overcome many difficulties. As a student, life isn't easy. You got payments on everything. We have high rent. We have high food costs, and they're not getting any lower. They're only going to rise. So something has to happen, because we always talk that education is our key to success. Education will not solve all our issues, but it'll make our issues a lot more easy to try and reach to. So if costs keep going up, students are not going to be able to graduate. Students are going to have to get into the programs, maybe their certificates, maybe their diplomas. But we have to push everyone to get their degrees, their doctorates, so we can all contribute into this economy. Us as students, we have stood up against people that we thought were 10 times more powerful than us. Like what you're doing right now, you're living in a park. We lived as a student for 72 days in our university 2 years ago. We know we can compare to what you're doing today. We've had many of you, I see faces in the crowd, that actually came and camped with us at our university, and I thank you for that. I have not spent any time in Victoria Park, and I apologize. I'm a very busy person, and I try and help out where I can. But I do read about it, and I do understand where you're coming from. The higher powers, there's a point in everybody's life where we're selfish. Everybody has that point. But sometimes people, their selfishness comes out right away. And those are the ones that get rich. And I can say that a lot of the 1%, their selfishness is probably right off the bat. You know, our selfishness, and I'm sorry, I should speak on behalf of myself when I say selfishness. I give a lot. You know, I make sure that people around me are eating just as much as I am. I make sure that people have a house. I can't say everybody, but people that I know, if they're in the city, I make sure that they can come stay in my place. So my selfishness isn't right away. So what I'm trying to go with this one is that in my culture, we make sure that we look after everyone. We make sure that nobody tries to get rich. It's kind of changed today with all this dollars and all this financial funding coming to our nations. Sometimes the people that are in charge take it the wrong way, and they start micromanaging, and they start getting rich by themselves. So that's the 1% that I'm dealing with in my own, I guess I'd call economy. So with that, just stay strong. We did as students 2 years ago. We lived for 72 days. We went to Ottawa. We went to the Saskatchewan government. We went to our own government, the Federation of Saskatchewan Indian Nations. And we told them enough is enough. Now let us be and let us students have what we need. And we did it. But we couldn't have done it without your support. So everybody has to join together. Everybody has to stand shoulder to shoulder. And in the end, answers will come. You know, sometimes it's not exactly what you want, but you'll get an answer. And what you're doing today, people are reading about it in papers. They're watching it on TV. They pass by you when you're living in the park. So the voice is out there, but it's up to you to keep it going strong. Go hard on the media. I love the media today because of what we did. We did everything with the media because that was our message to all the people. And the government will listen if you get them. Sorry, my throat is kind of dry. The government will listen if you can get them. Keep pressing. We did. We came successful. I'm still going to the university of my choice. So, and all of you can always take classes over there because of what we did 2 years ago. I'm really sorry, I have a dry throat. So with that, thank you very much for the invite. I thank all of you for listening to me. I know I would learn more from you if I just talk to all of you, so I will stick around for a while with that. Hi, thank you very much.
Got some space in here now for some other voices from the occupation. Can I call Lisa and Adam up? Also, some folks have been very involved over the last month.
Hello, everybody, and I just wanted to address there's been a lot of concerns from the public, and I'm just going to address them. The first one is our media has a short attention span and we need to occupy. If we just showed up with signs one day and went home after, it would never get attention. This is a movement, not a political organization, and only 1 month old. Camping in a public place has been a place for daily meetings, ideas, organization, and true democracy. If you think just voting an election is all democracy is, you're wrong. Voting is only a small part of democracy. We have the Charter of Rights for a reason. Third criticism is we have no demands or leaders. Our democracy has been suffering for many years. We can have legislation in Canada that will legalize internet censorship, spying, a crime bill that will take hundreds of billions of dollars in public spending and will suffer deep cuts to pay for it. Just because you voted doesn't mean everything's okay. Most Canadians do not know Harper gave the bank $75 billion and don't have to pay it back. Number 4, you should just get a job. That's the other criticism. Most of us occupiers have jobs. We're our students. Don't think that just because you have a job, everything's okay. And you should just let people in Regina suffer through homelessness. People occupy because they care and they know something's wrong. Number 5, we're a peaceful movement. The media and governments are afraid of us because they know the truth is on our side. In the US, since Occupy Wall Street began, a Wall Street Journal poll this week said 76% of Americans think the system favors the richest and income inequality is the biggest issue. This wasn't the case a month ago, so we know we're getting real change. And I think I have one more. And the 6th, next criticism, you guys had your time, now you made your point, now just go home. Well, our point is simply not to make a point. Our point is that the status quo will no longer do. We want real change and real results. When Rosa Parks decided to not move out of her seat, that did not bring an end to the civil rights movement. It was only the beginning. Rosa and her husband were fired from their jobs, suffered years of death threats. Standing up to the status quo is only effective if you refuse to back down. and stand up for what you believe in. We're only in the beginning, and the change is coming.
I don't want to take up too much time here. There's been a lot going on down at the Occupy site, and as one of the only university students that is actually actively participating in the occupation, I feel like I've failed my occupiers in some ways. I have been intending to get more student support rallied around this thing, and between classes and a job, some of us have both, I've been just running my butt off, just trying to do everything that needs to be done at the Occupy site. There's been a petition that we've been, or a application rather, for a campus club to support Occupy Regina that I haven't been able to collect the last couple of signatures from. So if there's anyone who'd like to help out, that's a really, really easy way to help us out. But more so, for those who would like to support the Occupy thing but don't really know what to do, don't really know how to help us out, and can't actually make it to the site to be part of a visible occupation. There's a ton of support that we need. Anybody that is just willing to read through some of the media headlines that are going around in the city and give a more balanced perspective to some of the comment sections. I've noticed the folks on the CBC comments are they're awfully pissed off at us occupiers. So again, there's tons of little things. So if there's anybody that would like to just help out with that, or even do more in the way of outreach here on campus, I'm going to be hanging around after this presentation's over, and come on up and see me, and we'll see if we can get a way built to work together. Thank you very much.
My name is Billy Patterson, and I've been occupying since day one. I've been there about half of the nights. I do have 3 jobs, a wife and 2 kids, and I am taking a class right now through SciAS at the university. This is kind of a special place because I really got involved with activism starting here a few years ago. I remember when the support staff went on strike and the university still ran up $750,000 deficit. Myself and Mark Spooner got to go up and meet with the president of the university. And then yesterday, myself and Spooner and 50 other occupiers walked into City Hall to meet with the mayor. And he didn't meet with us. We handed in the permit like we said, but there was some victories there I'll share with you. One was that they told us we had to leave, and we refused. We said, no, this is public space. Why would we have to leave? And they said, well, you're interrupting with our day-to-day business. And so we organized, we kept the lines clear, we kept the doors clear, and we just refused to listen to them. They said we had to go. Another thing is we learned the names of the people, maybe we'll call them the 1% at City Hall that are preventing us. Glenn Davies, whose signature is on the eviction notice, if anyone wants to see it on the table there, personally acknowledged that he was the one who gave the order to turn off the power, and he was the one who gave the order to remove the porta potty. And although he had the power to bring them back, he had no intention of doing that. They often iterated that they were not willing to negotiate with us, that they were not there to talk about these issues, but they recognized that we were making a point. They told us we had to leave the front entrance area and move to the foyer, and we didn't go. And an hour later, they apologized and said, okay, well, we can stay. And I even went into the public cafeteria and refilled their coffee because there was some confusion amongst that. And just today, this morning, I went into my main job, and I got evicted for 3 days because of my involvement in the protests. And because I did have to miss some work for that, I wasn't planning to stay at City Hall for 5 hours. But I didn't lose my job, that's good. And thankfully, I'm able to be here, and I was able to be there this morning when the city tried to come up with reasons for wanting us to leave. The first reason that they had said was health and safety concerns. And we called them hypocrites because they removed our safe means of sanitation, the porta potty. And so they kind of stopped using that line. And again, their press release is also there on the table if anyone wants to look. We couldn't really hear what they were saying because they wouldn't let us inside. But again, at the same time, they had said there's going to absolutely be nobody from Occupy Regina allowed within City Hall. Well, we had 4 of us in there, and when the media came out to talk to us afterwards, they asked us to leave the foyer, and we said, if you want the media to have coverage of us being escorted out by police and security, then go ahead, but we're going to do our media scrum here. And again, they backed out. They said this is something we had to do. We said, no, this is our rights. We have a right to say what we did. And I think the media has been really, really supportive of this. I've been really encouraged to see, even from CJME to CBC to CTV to Global, all generally positive coverage of what's going on here. Again, I know there's now this 1% at City Hall that is against it, but in the words of Russell, and one of the things we've been repeating, you can't evict an idea. And I think they're starting to recognize that even if they do fine us, if they do arrest us, if they do take down our tents, that they're not going to stop this. And I just want to look around right now at everyone who's here right now, because you guys are part of this movement. This is going to be remembered in the history books, and you can say that you were there and you were a part of it. And I love you all. Thank you.
I'm back up here again. I get long-winded. The one thing that I just wanted to touch on was that a porta potty seems like such a trivial thing, and the Council of Canadians, a national humanitarian organization, had provided that porta potty for us for use for 1 month. The city deemed fit to take it away under a very simple parks bylaw. But I just wanted to read this one thing here that was provided by Jim Elliott from the council. In a media release issued in early November, the Council of Canadians Regina Chapter activist Jim Elliott said the United Nations General Assembly voted overwhelmingly to affirm the right to safe and clean drinking water and sanitation as a human right that is essential for the full enjoyment of life and all human rights. And this is how we are providing that right to occupiers in Regina for the next month and perhaps longer. There will be that service on that site. The City of Regina saw fit to just invoke a simple civic bylaw in contravention of something that was supposed to stand up for United Nations sanctioned human rights.
So we're really good on time. We've got lots of time to hear from everybody who wants to speak. And in the meantime, I'll call up some members from the Students' Union. I'm not sure which ones of you are going to talk. Just Kent? Oh, come on. Okay, we have Kent, the president of the University of Regina Students' Union.
Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you, sisters and brothers, and thank you, my friends. I'm joined, and I'm sure they'll talk eventually, by Ursu's Vice President of Finance and Operations, Hannah Noor, Ursu's Vice President of External Affairs, Paige Kazima, but there are also some other people here as well. There's Jordan Puskis, the President of the Social Work Student Society. I see in the back there's Jen Bergen, the Executive Director of Harper, who have supported the Occupy movement, as we heard from one radio host in particular. So I'm not as good as Cadmus was, and I do require some notes. He can just sort of talk because he knows what he's talking about. I don't, so I have to read it. But for those of you among us who are maybe not so familiar with this institution, allow me to say welcome to the University of Regina. And for everyone else, maybe you're a professor here, or you visit often, or you're a student, or you're a former student, I'm going to talk about some things that you already know all too well, and that is that students are part of the 99% and supportive of the Occupy movement. And I'll start things off by maybe just saying that it has been a tough past few years for the learners of this province, and if I may wager a guess, I would say probably we're in for at least 4 more tough years. In the last 4 years, the provincial government has thawed a tuition freeze and hiked fees 11%. But that's following a 137% increase in the 1990s, a 38% increase from 2000 to 2005, and it's more than a funding squeeze. It is a very systematic attempt to make post-secondary education attainable to only the richest among us, and kid yourself not, it is a very systematic attempt to privatize public education in the province of Saskatchewan. But friends, when tuition fees are skyrocketing at about the same rate as Band-Aid solutions, you end up with only two things. One is mass social exclusion to post-secondary institutions. The other, and for those who do finish their programs, is crushing student debt. Student debt today is the highest it's ever been in the history of humanity. In the country of Canada, student debt is about to surpass $15 billion. That's million with a B. Which is, just PS, and by the way, the legislated cap that the federal government is allowed to lend out in student loans. And when you factor in private debt, and that's money borrowed from family, money borrowed from private banks, money that you have on your credit card, the situation is even worse. And instead of investing more in universities and colleges and building bright futures, our federal government is building big prisons, and it's a shame. But tuition, sisters and brothers, tuition is not the only barrier to attending post-secondary institutions. There are many, and I'd like to talk about just a couple. Accessible housing and childcare present challenges to people in general, but students in particular, especially when you consider the following statistics. Since 2006, average rents in Regina have increased 43%, while the vacancy rate continues to be at or below 1%. 45% of University of Regina students rely on rental housing, and the situation is dire because of it. It is preventing people from coming to university or continuing in university. The problem needs to be fixed as soon as possible, preferably yesterday. But what about childcare? It's something that is far too often overlooked, most notably by politicians, in relation to how it affects students. 10% of University of Regina students have young children. Yet the wait list for a space here at the daycares at this university is over 400 families long. And if you do manage to get a space, it will cost you $605 each and every month. And to add insult to injury, there actually is a plan in existence that would go a long way to addressing housing and childcare needs for students at this university. The plan exists. It is clear, it is well researched, it is fully costed, put together plain as day, and was submitted to the provincial government by the University of Regina. The university itself is saying that housing and childcare needs to be fixed. Do you have a question? 5 minutes. 5 minutes? The university itself is saying that these issues need to be fixed, and a residence and childcare proposal was submitted to Brad Wall in May of this year. It would add 680 residence beds to campus and 180 new childcare spaces, and since its submission many months ago, it has been collecting dust on government shelves. Exactly. Part of the solution is in front of the government today, and yet they do nothing. Minister Rob Norris says he's looking it over. Brad Wall says he's looking it over, but I think it's been overlooked long enough and it needs to be approved immediately. And I would just add, since the Premier has a new mandate, that if it is not approved in the coming days, then he has once again failed the students of this university. But finally, friends, we need to talk more about Aboriginal education. The university completion rates gap between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people is growing every year. We need a provincial system to support Aboriginal students. We need long-term and sustainable funding for the First Nations University of Canada. But above all else, we need to remove the 2% cap on the post-secondary student support program now. Not only do we need to remove the cap, but then we need to properly fund First Nations and Inuit education in Canada. But the PSSP has been arbitrarily capped at 2% growth since 1996, and less students are funded now for the program than were funded back then. In Saskatchewan alone, 1,000 First Nations people were denied post-secondary education funding last year. Imagine, 1,000 members of the youngest and fastest growing demographic in this province were told that there isn't enough money for them to go to school because of an unjust and arbitrary policy, and it needs to stop immediately. And so, if it wasn't clear before, it should be now. Whether we are talking about seniors, or whether we're talking about our sisters and brothers in the labor movement, working people, whether we're talking about the and underemployed, or whether we're talking about those 400 families on the wait list for a childcare space, or whether we're talking about those 1,000 First Nations people in Saskatchewan who are told they can't go to school, or whether we're talking about debt-burdened students in general, it is clear that we're all in this together. And so friends, when somebody, whether it's today, tomorrow, or maybe Saturday at 8 a.m., when somebody calls you crazy for standing up what you believe in, or if somebody calls you crazy for camping in Victoria Park, or if somebody calls you crazy for demanding social and economic justice, or if somebody calls you crazy and asks, why do you care about tuition fees? I want you to tell them, because the 99% united shall never be defeated. Thank you.
We have some time for question and answer if people who've spoken in the last little section would like to field some questions. I should also say that there's a petition moving around in the audience that the occupation set up yesterday in order to ask the City of Regina to allow them to stay. So put your name on that. And I just want to say that the university can sometimes be a frightening place for people or feel like an unwelcome space. And we've had a number of voices from the occupiers who've been downtown. Let's give them a big round of applause and make them feel welcome in this space. Does anybody have questions or answers?
I have a question about City Hall. I've been hearing on CBC, all the media are reporting that City Hall is asking occupiers to book an appointment. They booked an appointment. Has the mayor granted an appointment?
He has not granted a response to our request for meetings as of yet.
So the question was, has the mayor granted a request for an appointment to speak to the mayor about the issues? And the answer was, no, he has not granted the protesters an appointment to talk to him.
And just yesterday, we delivered a copy of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It says, we are not camping, this is our permit. Several of the around 50 people that walked in to peacefully occupy the City of Regina for the next 5 hours signed the back of it. Some of us put phone numbers on, and they said they'd get back to us. But we still have not heard back from them yet.
Just a question. I was sending a message to the Facebook page of the City of Regina asking why they really kicked you guys, if that's a human right, and how they suddenly changed their policy. And they said, oh, these guys don't pay, it's taxpayers' money. So I wonder whether we aren't able to provide the money for the power for the Occupy movement somehow. I mean, I think we should be able to. Have you tried that?
Do you want to go to the mic to answer?
My question is that would be, how can the city say that none of the people can bring down their taxpayers, that none of us have contributed to the money that pays that power bill, which to my understanding is donated.
I'd like to also point out that our night watch has kept that part of downtown safer than it's been in decades. We put up with a lot of stuff that usually the police would be there dealing with, that we've ended up dealing with, that's been, and we've kept that part of downtown cleaner than it's been in a long time too.
Okay, a question. Sorry, a question from the audience here. Yeah, I did it.
The question was, the undercurrent in the media and around town is that there's drugs down there. What's the response to that?
How many of you have spent any amount of time in Vic Park in the last decade? How many of you know that people do smoke pot in that park whether we're there or not? That's my answer.
I'll also add too that one of the very first internal rules or laws that we passed by consensus at a General Assembly was that there'd be absolutely no illegal drugs or alcohol in the campsite. And I think it speaks powers when we have the director for Normal Saskatchewan, the marijuana legalization chapter, telling people they need to leave the park if they're smoking marijuana. And so we have remained committed to that, and I'll say even now with this threat of arrest over our heads, we're all extra careful that we have empty pockets.
We got another 5 minutes for questions if someone has one at this point. Otherwise, we'll move on to the program. All right, I think we've got. We're going to be screening a film right away, and we'll ask Mark and Elena to come up and maybe say a few words about it as an introduction. So Elena was involved in the making of the film, and she's from Carmichael Outreach. And Mark Spooner is, as many of you probably know, a prof on campus here who does a lot of work around homelessness.
I think I'll let Elena speak about homelessness, and if you've lived in Regina or read the media in the last 5 years, you probably know we have a homelessness issue. It's not breaking news. I'd like to reiterate what Cadmus has said, and I'd like to thank City 4 and pay acknowledgement to that. That's why we're all able to be here peacefully in the first place. I'd like to also thank Emily and the organizers for today's event. And I'd like to thank the campers who are actually bravely being out there in the cold to make a point and to being a constant reminder of the inequities that are all around us. So thank you, campers, because although I identify as part of the Occupy movement, I get to sleep at home in a warm bed. And so I'm very, very grateful for the work you're doing down there and reminding City Hall and reminding the business people who work there every day that there is a problem. There is too big of a gap right now. I'd also like to say, man, this is so exciting. I don't remember a movement that's been so localized and global at the same time, all around the world. It's very exciting to be part of it. And although we haven't won the war, yesterday that battle at City Hall was won by the Occupy movement. And I knew we really won when that classroom of kids came in, just as they were trying to get rid of us. All these 5-year-old kids came in with baked goods, and you could see the city officials scrambling they didn't know what to do because they knew that their message is morally bankrupt. It was awesome.
To give a cupcake to the mayor.
It was so good. They didn't know what to do. I want to also talk about this news release that the City Hall just put out in consideration of the safety and comfort of our customers. Let me tell you something. We're not customers. We're citizens. Like, this just shows you how much the neoliberal business model has taken over even our government. It's the City Hall, for fuck's sakes. Sorry, I mean, it's our City Hall. And I think we are part of the everyday business of City Hall. We were there, they tried to tell us that we don't have any business there. Really? We don't have a right to go talk to our councillors, to our mayor? Is that what's become of government and democracy? So anyway, I think that now someone will speak to what we're supposed to talk about.
Follow that rousing speech. My name's Elena Harrison, and I work at Carmichael Outreach. I don't know if people are familiar with what we do, but we're a drop-in center downtown, and
and we just kind of try and be a place that people